Welcome to the Art Design Chicago Talk series on Lumpen Radio. Join us as we delve into the heart of Chicago's cultural and artistic identity. In this series, artists, curators, and cultural organizers will explore how themes of activism, indigeneity, migration, and displacement intertwine with the city's artistic tapestry. Broadcasting in Spanish and English, each conversation will bring you closer to the creative minds behind the exhibitions featured in Art Design Chicago. Get ready to dive in to the Art Design Chicago Talk series.
Welcome to the Art Design Chicago Talk series. My name is Nick Wiley, and we'll be conducting an interview today as part of the conversations we're having with projects and exhibitions that are part of the Terra Foundation's Art Design Chicago. Art Design Chicago is an initiative that highlights the city's artistic heritage and creative communities through a giant series of events and exhibitions all across Chicago, exploring our city's unique contributions to art and design history. Today, we'll be talking about Designing for Change, Chicago protest art of the 1960s and 70s, which is up now and for a long while still through next year, 2025, at the Chicago History Museum. And we're lucky to have guests Monica Trinidad, who is one of the artists in the show, Olivia Mahoney, the curator of the exhibition, and Erica Griffin, who is the museum's director of education. I'm going to give a little bio for each of you, and then we can get into it. Monica Trinidad is a queer Latinx visual artist and organizer based in Chicago, known for her compelling integration of arts and activism. She co-founded Brown and Proud Press, For the People Artist Collective, both of which focus cultural organizing and storytelling to disrupt dominant narratives and support social justice movements. She's now a part of the Just Seeds Collective, and her work spans zine making, illustration, posters, and her art has been exhibited at prestigious venues such as the National Museum of Mexican Art, Jane Addams Hull House Museum in Chicago and beyond. Her approach to art is deeply collaborative and community-oriented, emphasizing the importance of personal narratives and healing in the struggle for justice. Monica's contributions have been pivotal in campaigns such as No Cop Academy, which integrates art as a central component of its activism. Olivia Mahoney is the distinguished curator of the exhibition with nearly 40 years of experience at the Chicago History Museum. She has curated several landmark exhibitions, including Chicago, Crossroads of America, Modern by Design, Chicago Streamlines America, and A City Divided, Race, Fear, and the Law in Police Violence Cases. Her work has been instrumental in showcasing Chicago's rich history through a lens that combines historical artifacts with broader social and cultural narratives. Since 2019, Mahoney has expanded her curatorial expertise, working for the Museum of Science and Industry and now the Obama Presidential Center. She has returned to the Chicago History Museum for this important exhibition. Erica Griffin is the Elizabeth F. Cheney Director of Education at the Chicago History Museum, where she has been leading educational initiatives since 2021. She joined CHM in 2020 as the Public Community and Engagement Manager, and develops frameworks to enhance civic and cultural literacy. Prior to her tenure at CHM, Erica served as the Director of Education at the DeSable Museum of African American History, where she developed and facilitated innovative public engagement and K-12 learning programs focused on accessibility, equity, and object-based learning. Erica holds a master's degree in museum studies from Johns Hopkins University and a bachelor's in biological anthropology, which I want to know what that means, from UIUC. So, sorry, we have a lot of amazing accolades about each of you, and now we want to actually hear from you. And so I thought maybe, I just introduced Erica, I thought maybe given that you're very used to conveying the broad strokes and the essential elements of exhibitions at the CHM, you could help us into this exhibition, which features not only protest art from the 60s and 70s, but also some antecedent work from Chicago. And then as Monica's here to represent folks making work today. So can you help listeners just get a general understanding of the exhibition before we get into the nitty-gritty with other folks on the call?
Absolutely. And thank you for inviting me in. It is always wonderful to be in conversation with great minds that are doing great things for our communities like Monica and like Libby. And this project is a testament to that kind of work. what the exhibition compels audiences to consider is that throughout Chicago's history, art has been this primary way that messages were or are communicated, whether they are social or political or otherwise. And it's because of the unique capacity of art to make what can be seemingly inaccessible easier for people to understand and understand it quickly, and also the unique capacity of art to build solidarity for movements. That all kind of comes together in this exhibition, and we want people to understand that art is essential to building solidarity for movements, to communicating out messages very clearly and easily, and it is a really unique way to interpret history. So within the exhibition, there are over 100 objects that are from the museum's collection, some that were really graciously donated by lenders that helps us to tell this story. So there are 5 different movements that are specifically indicated in the exhibition because they were really life-changing in that time period and remain a critical part of our public memory when we think about the development of our society, both nationally and in our city. So the Chicago Freedom Movement, the Black Art and the Black Power movement, women's liberation, anti-Vietnam War, and at the time, gay liberatory efforts, those all were hot topics in the 60s and 70s and remain so. And the art that was produced is indicative of just how much these movements, these moments meant to people, and the art really shouted out and communicated very widely and loudly and proudly what these individual artists were advocating for, and the movements, the places, spaces, and people they were also advocating for. So it is an interesting interpretation of history where we are letting art lead the way. That's it in a nutshell. And thinking about that precedent, that's definitely true in our city, and that legacy continues through to the present.
That's totally great. And you kind of got to a fun question I was going to ask a little later, but just having listed some of the major movements that are represented in the show, women's liberation, queer liberation, anti-Vietnam protests, the Youth International Party, the Yippies are represented, and AfriCobra, the Chicago Freedom Movement. I was going to see if you all had to pick. I know a lot of these movements are intersectional, but if you had been around in the 60s and 70s, what do you think you would have put your efforts behind most that's represented in this show, or something that might not be? And it's maybe not, you can pick more than one, but if you have a special affinity to any of the movements in the show, what would it be? And maybe we can start with Erica and move through the rest of you.
You just really went out of the park with this one. It's like, my goodness, there's so much to choose from. I can say this much in a nutshell. Being African American, being a woman, seeing myself and my culture, my history represented on those walls was so moving and affirming in a beautiful way. And I would say, had I existed at that time, I would like to say definitely the Chicago Freedom Movement, and then the outgrowth of the freedom movement, the Black Power movement, and also thinking about women's liberation and the very unique and very real needs of Black women that they were contending with at that time. Put me down for all 3 is what I can say.
If y'all can still hear me, can we go to Monica next?
Hi, yeah. Thank you for having me. This is a really good question. And I got my organizing and activism start in campus-based anti-war organizing, organizing student walkouts against the war in Iraq. So I think that I think I would go with the anti-war movement. My dad was also drafted to the Vietnam War, so it also feels like a personal connection there. And I think that the war just also had the anti-war movement had a lot of intersections between race, gender, and class that really speaks to me in this question. So yeah, that's what I would choose.
Thanks, Monica. And then if we could move to Olivia, you've had the most time with all of this research, and I'm sure it's hard to pick a favorite, but you also had a lot of time at the History Museum before coming back for this show. So if after you talk about some of the most compelling movements that you get really excited to look back at, you could talk a little bit about what in general made you so enthusiastic to come back and curate this show as well, if you don't mind.
All right. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's really a great opportunity for all of us. And I'm actually old enough to have lived through this period and participated in several of the movements as a college student. So I was involved in the anti-war movement and the women's movement and also the environmental movement, which is not included in the exhibition in a major way. And that is because the research showed that those involved in that movement did not use art very extensively or barely.
Yeah.
And so it didn't make any sense to put it in there because this is an exhibition about the use of art in social movements.
Yeah.
So as Erica mentioned, this is a different way to look at this history. I've always wanted to do an exhibition about the social movements of this time period because they were so transformative and they really left an imprint on American society, creating the world that we live in currently. These issues are still alive, they're still contested, they're still debated. So I just felt that this would make a compelling exhibition for our visitors. But this is also a very complex period. There's so much going on. And I felt and thought that art was an easy way in, or an easier way in than trying to do a straightforward academic history of this time period. And
Yeah.
I also knew that the History Museum had materials in its collection that would lend itself to this kind of exhibition. The time I started the research, I didn't know how much we had, and I wasn't 100% sure where I was going, but that's what the research helped determine. So it was invaluable. And it was really fun for me to kind of relive this time period. But it was also at times emotional, at times it brought back, really conflicting memories for me because it was a pretty tense, exciting, but tense time in American history. So
one of the striking pieces that sort of stands out beyond that, though, is the work with the tree that's titled "It's Later Than You Think," and it's like a tree with it's a surrealist Chicago image, sort of. It seems like that sort of prescience, I guess, in general, in this work, kind of thinks about made me think that we're looking back at this work, but so many of the artists in the show are so forward-thinking and so looking into the future. So, and I think that continues to happen. And with the DNC coming to Chicago almost next week, a lot of people are thinking about this time. I'm not sure if you knew that was happening when you started planning the show, but it seems
sure.
Yeah.
I did. I was aware of it, but that's not the reason for my doing the exhibition. But you really can't avoid talking about the DNC in such an exhibition. So there it is. And I think it's great timing for us. We'll see what happens at this year's convention.
Yeah. I have more questions about that later, but I wanted to jump to Monica and think about your work in relation to the rest of the show. There's a section at the end of the exhibition which includes work by you and William Estrada and several other artists who are making work today. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your piece and what sort of has really been of note to you in terms of inspirational work from the past, and also in which ways do you kind of feel like your work sometimes breaks from some of the more historical work. There are woodblock prints and prints with a few words on them in the new section, but kind of typical of some of your work, it's you employ digital methods. You sometimes have longer texts that sort of draw someone more into history or movement. So I know that's too many questions in one, but if you could talk, maybe if you could start with your piece in the show, which talks about police torture, and then some of the aesthetic choices you made.
So I really believe that art is a portal for storytelling, which is why I was very delighted to hear that my piece would be included in this exhibition. When I was invited to create this piece by Josh McPhee, who is part of the Celebrate People's History, who has created the Celebrate People's History series, which is a series of posters that tells different stories about different movements throughout history, particularly movements that are more on the far left, revolutionary, more on the radical end of the political spectrum. And I was tasked with creating this poster, but to create a poster that tells a story that has spanned decades of time is truly a feat to do. So, I worked directly with the Chicago Torture Justice Memorials organizers and activists and lawyers who were part of this movement to create this paragraph, of text that told the story in a very quick way around the fight for reparations for police torture survivors in Chicago. And it's difficult, and I try to utilize a lot of symbolism throughout the piece to tell the story in a more comprehensive way. We know that art and visuals and design, a lot of what is included in this exhibit, it like Erica said, can speak to the masses in such a quick way, and way quicker than a book or an essay or an article online. And so I think I'm also, as somebody who is an organizer, I'm thinking a lot about how artists can be utilized as decisive strategic thinkers in partnership with organizations. So all of that said, I do think a lot about how to make art that not only acts as a portal for storytelling, but does a little bit of storytelling quickly as well, And so, in the piece, there's the Chicago flag that has an extra star on it, which represents the torture that many survivors in Chicago had under John Birch in between 1970 and 1991, just like memorializing and recognizing, right? Because I think the first method of repairing harm is to acknowledge it. And so that was our method of acknowledging in that movement, in that campaign, to acknowledge the harm that was done. And then the main person on the poster is Mary L. Johnson, who is a mother of one of the first, she was a mother of a torture survivor who was one of the first to file a complaint against John Birch. So I wanted to include her because I really felt that mothers of survivors were an integral part of this campaign to get justice and reparations for the torture survivors.
You mentioned sort of more text and you talk about books. I see behind you on your screen your cover for the Mariame Kaba book, We Do This Till We Free Us. And there are also a lot of publications in the exhibition. There's a publication for the exhibition. There's a little zine that helps people go through it, which I assume that Erica had a part in. Everyone here. And then also there are tons of publications kind of under glass. So we have, of course, a lot of Ebony, Book of Life, Black Pride, feminist publications such as Lavender Women and Blazing Star, the Ellis's Bookstore, which was in Hyde Park and Woodlawn, and then somewhere west, I couldn't find where west, is represented heavily, and then also publications around the queer movement. So I wanted each of you to maybe kind of like pick out texts that you have had access to, whether that was in looking through the archive and choosing there are some amazing covers. The Seed was also a Chicago-based anti-war publication that you have a big section of the exhibition devoted to. In the didactic text, it says that they were sort of like a hippie cultural organization on the north side of Chicago that were then radicalized as anti-war publication makers throughout then the late 60s and early 70s. So I don't know, there just seems like a lot there, and it's always so hard to see an issue of a magazine that you can't touch, but how did you, you all got to touch them. And so I want to hear what's inside a little bit, but then also sort of how do you bring some of those judging a book by its cover to life with some of the didactics and contextualization. And I'm afraid I'm going to do like a favorite thing again. So if you all could get the whole archive of one of these publications in your home, what would it be? And maybe we can start with Olivia and then go through the rest of you.
Well, that's a tough question because only one.
Maybe two.
Yeah. Before I answer that, I do want to let you know that there is a catalog for the exhibition.
Yes.
And it was sent to our members and of course lenders and people who helped with the exhibition. I'm not sure it's for sale yet in the store.
I tried to find it. I think it's members only right now, but
yeah.
I'm excited to see it when it comes. Yeah.
Well, hopefully it will be broader.
Yeah.
Distributed later. So which publication would I take to have for my own?
Other than the one you made, the ones you made.
Oh my gosh. I think that I really liked the materials that are shown in Ellis's bookstore.
Yeah.
I think those are really fantastic. And as you mentioned, Ellis's was a Black bookstore on the South side and then the West side. And they were closely connected to the Black arts movement. They were a real hub of that movement. And so that was a really great vehicle to tell really complex history about the Black Power movement and the Black arts movement. So I think that if I had an opportunity to collect that kind of material and keep it to myself, keep it for myself, that's what I do. I just want to let you know that CHM did have several of those publications in the collection already, and that was a big surprise to me. They had not been shown before, so that was lovely. But then I was also able to find additional copies online because this material was mass produced. It's not unique, one of a kind. So you can still find these copies out there. And that was also really exciting. It was like a treasure hunt.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you bring up, I would love to hear, Erica, some of your thoughts about the publications in the show, but then also Olivia brings up the archive. And I should have looked this up. I've always wondered, I've always been curious about how accessible the archive is to artists and researchers who might be interested in engaging. I don't know. I know that Olivia, you studied Lincoln and have made a bunch of exhibitions about him. I have a ancestor who was maybe, I don't know what you think about gay Lincoln stuff, but my ancestor, Elmer Ellsworth, people think maybe they kissed a couple times or something.
Related to Elmer Ellsworth? Wow.
And the Weddings. I would love to do a call just about that. But I've always been curious about how someone who's interested in a deep research, I know that there are Elmer Ellsworth, who was the first person to die in the Civil War and maybe loved Lincoln. There's a lot of stuff about him in the museum, but I've just never known how I would go about as an artist or researcher learning more about that stuff in your collection. And so I don't know if that's your purview, Erica, or how you direct people to that, but say there was someone who really wanted to know more about the ebony in your collection. Could they come with white gloves and look through them, or how do you help people access those deeper dives?
That is a really, really good question. And we hear it all the time. And I'm happy to tell you, the museum, CHM, is not just a museum, it's also a research center. So if you have curiosities into history, you want to learn more about the places and spaces you live, or a person in history that is related to Chicago or Illinois broadly, you are able to make your appointment and go right into the research center. And there's an amazing team of librarians that are eager and ready and willing to jump in and assist. It is open to the public. The hours are listed on our website. So when you have those curiosities, please consider CHM as a resource to you. You're welcome to go in and peruse, as they say. And I will say this, going back to your question about, text in or publications in the exhibition. I certainly have my favorites. I'm trying to decide which one I'm going to share with you, but as an educator, trying to make pathways for young learners to understand through text and art how to make sense of the scope of the exhibition. So art is this communicator of justice movements and the like. What we try to do is fold those resources, those primary sources, into curricular resources for classroom use. So we're working now to pull together a learning guide for 6th through 8 and 9th through 12th grade educators. We'll also have some teacher professional development workshops that will help them, will communicate strategies and the like that they can use to bring that content into the classroom and to prepare them for visits to the museum and future study as well. So number one, the museum is a research center. Feel free to go in and investigate. You might find some interesting things related to your relative, I'm sure. And regarding materials that are in the exhibition that I would love to have for my own, most certainly high on the list is the Dr. Burroughs, What Will Your Legacy Be piece. Her poems are coded in my DNA. They're beautiful, they're meaningful, they communicate Black pride, and they are sort of burned into how I think about education and the value that comes with literacy in myriad forms. I will also say what I love about this exhibition is that across the different sections, the art usually or oftentimes includes text. That becomes a primary resource that can go into the classroom, where you are not only remarking on the form, the technique that the artists use, but the message is right there and it's so clear. So when you think about Afro-Cobra or you think about Carlos Cortez, like, they're including text to help you infer and look more closely, investigate more clearly what you're looking at in the image. So for me, this exhibition is of critical importance because you are able to get at history through this arts route that can be easier for young people to digest, or can be an access point that is easier for them to lean into when we're learning history. But there are also so many rich texts and resources and the like that can fortify your arts investigation in the classroom. One other thing to mention, thinking about Ebony, if there is interest, the museum does have a full set of Ebony Magazine's editions, and you can access some of those via QR code in the exhibition or by setting up your visit to the research center. So lots of ways to investigate, and for sure, the Burroughs, What Will Your Legacy Be pieces is one of my favorites that I would love to have.
Great, thank you. Monica, I've got so many follow-ups about that and digitization and text, and can I put you on the spot and just ask for one quick publication that really caught your eye in the exhibition or recently in general?
Yeah, I mean, in the exhibition, I would absolutely say the Chicago Seed publication series. I think there's something so critical about art as historical context, and I think that really captured so much historical context in Chicago movement history that was written like in real time, right, and published in real time. And I think that that's such a treasure. And I hope that more people, and I want more people to be documenting their stories themselves as we as our movements grow and become more and more intersectional. I think that publication is just what a treasure.
Everyone, you're listening to WLPN LP Chicago 105.5 Lumpen Radio. We're talking about Chicago protest art of the 1960s and 70s, the exhibition Designing for Change, with curator Olivia Mahoney, artist Monica Trinidad, and director of education Erica Griffin. So we left off with Monica talking about the section of the exhibition which has publications from The Seed, which was an anti-war publication, and we had started talking about the work you've done for publication covers, Monica. But then I'm just thinking about, like, in the background of The Seed element of the exhibition, it shows all the different places where the publication was distributed around Chicago. So it would say, like, here's where it goes in the Loop, here's where it goes on the West Side. Those vectors of transmission, well, we still have them. We still have the Reader in print, which has a new article about your exhibition. And Lumpen Magazine just went out all over the city with a once a year issue about the coming election. We also have other vectors of communication as activists and artists now. And so I was thinking about your kind of reflections on when you're looking through the catalog of this exhibition or at the show, the ways that people kind of got the word out and the rate of transmission versus like the super rapid communications pulse now, the use of images in social media, and like maybe your work especially as it represents itself in different ways, in posters and protests, in storefronts, in people's windows, in protest marches, or being shared across the internet via people's social media and posts. And so, like, how might your tactics kind of shift in this different landscape as it's emerged?
Yeah, I mean, I think they've shifted in terms of just becoming even more accessible than they were before. You know, printmaking has always been, I mean, technology has definitely increased the accessibility of printmaking, but printmaking has always been a way to quickly get the word out about an issue or an action. I think in our digital world and our increasingly digital world, I think there are very strategic ways to utilize art in a campaign, for example. I think that there's something that in my experience, I've participated in campaigns where we use a hashtag, and then with that hashtag, we can include information, artwork, graphics that that are both art and a call to come to an action downtown or a rally in a neighborhood or at City Hall. And so I think it's only just been made more accessible, our art and organizing efforts. I think also the ability, a lot of the work that I've been utilizing most, or a lot of the methods for making work that I've been utilizing, especially during the pandemic, has been digital art and digital illustration. And so during the start of the pandemic, right, one piece that I had made really quickly was a graphic that said, "We keep each other safe," right? And I think that was a way to help people imagine a world outside of what's right in front of them. And what we were being faced with, these issues of the pandemic, were just being exacerbated for many communities who are already in crisis mode. And so one way to, for organizers and activists to double down on the values and messaging that they're already holding and disseminating out to communities, this was an opportunity to say, hey, this is how we keep each other safe through mask wearing and keep 6 feet apart and all of that. And it just, I wouldn't say it went viral because I've seen posts that go viral, but it did get a lot of traction, and I'm still seeing it being utilized today as we still face COVID, but also in other ways of we keep each other safe through mutual aid and community building and knowing our neighbors and all of those different ways of imagining a new world outside of what's right in front of us. So so I like to think that the additional accessibility of digital art only makes our movements stronger in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I'll just note that it seems like you're talking about the work kind of having a life of its own, and you see it pop up in different places. I've noticed that with your collective Just Seeds, there's a lot of work that it's not about making an artwork that's yours and you need to take ownership and other people can't use it, especially with work around apartheid and genocide. There's been a big push to just sort of say everybody take this, just get it out into the world. And so I really appreciate that about the work you're able to do kind of across the country, but also across the world with this coalition that kind of can happen in different and more rapid ways that way. And people can just hit print sometimes and have a poster that one of you has designed. And that sort of, in a funny way, dovetails into a question I had for you, Olivia. You mentioned, because things were multiples and that they were spread all over, it's not necessarily as hard to find as like an artist's original painting that would otherwise be hard to acquire that you can treasure hunt and find online. Were there any things that you really wanted to find for the exhibition that you thought would have been amazing in their original and not a reproduction? Or were there things that you just didn't have the room to include that you felt like, oh, I wish more people knew about this element?
Yeah, there were several pieces that I think have vanished. One of them is a banner from the Chicago Freedom Movement. You see them in photographs. They were large. They were very impressive. CHM doesn't have one in the collection. I've not seen anybody else have one. I think if another institution had it, they would have shown it or at least publicized it, because that's very important. But I still wanted to include a banner, so we commissioned an artist to create one for the exhibition. Very similarly, a banner for the National Alliance of Black Feminists. Again, I spotted that in a photograph, a real grainy photograph I found online. We don't have it in the collection, yet we have that organization's archive. CPL also has their archive. The founder had a duplicate set deposited there as well. But they don't have a banner either. So again, that's just something that wasn't kept, wasn't saved. But we could create that as well. And commissioning a contemporary Chicago artist to work and to create those pieces and to remain faithful to the originals, not to create something new and different, but to follow the historical record. It was really satisfying addition to the exhibition. And there were other pieces too that I couldn't find. But the bigger problem for us was that because most of this is graphic material, we cannot keep a lot of these pieces out for the entire duration of the exhibition.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a real crack conservation team, and they were just terrific to work with, but they had to give me the good news is that some of these pieces were too fragile to exhibit for longer than 3 or 6 months. So that started another round of tracking down duplicate pieces that I could then include, or something very similar.
Wow.
But we still couldn't find everything. I couldn't find a rotation piece for every single item in the exhibition. So that's when we started to make facsimiles. Our photo department took beautiful scans of the image and then produced in-house a paper copy that looks like the original. But we note that on the label, and with a note of explanation for conservation reasons. This is why we had to do it, because we want to preserve these pieces for future generations. And this is the first exhibition in a really long time at the museum that's focused on the graphic arts. And so it was presented a challenge to the staff as how we're going to do this. We had to consider lighting as well as rotations. We had to consider special mounts, special kinds of cases. But it's ironic because Chicago has been such a strong and important center of the graphic arts, both political graphic arts and commercial graphic arts for so long. And yet I think it's been overlooked in Chicago arts history. But the graphic arts have always been my favorite Chicago art. And, it was, again, it was a challenge to find duplicate pieces, but it was also really fun. And, it was, and now a lot of those pieces have come into the collection as well. We did acquire some new pieces for the collection as a result of this project.
That's really great. I have a couple directions to go from there. One is I'm just curious about like how soon protest artwork is like considered like ready to go into a collection like at the CHM. I know friends who like reproduce signs from 3 years ago from Occupy because they can't find, you know, and so maybe thinking about for people participating in the graphic arts, it's maybe important for you to retain. I can see some of Monica's behind her, retain some of your own work, even if it's like to go out on a march once and then you think it's not important. People in the future will kind of think this is a valuable thing to be able to look at. And with that in mind, I feel like there's just something too when you mentioned there hasn't been a real graphic arts exhibition at the museum. It's pretty rare in general throughout art museums as well. But I feel like the CHM was uniquely or especially able to contextualize these works like way more thoroughly and in engaging ways to different generations and ages than maybe like the Art Institute or MCA might have been. So Erica, I know you probably had a big part in that. This booklet, which helps like ask some questions from each of the sections, is a part of that. But there are also interactive elements where you're weaving on top of lots of other people's weaving of their interests and focuses with protest work. And then there were also like really good, I hadn't seen this done so well, maybe anywhere, the short audio pieces from some of the artists that are involved. It's not like you sit there for an hour and listen to them, but you found like really important contextualizing elements that you just press a button and get to hear. And for people who don't want to sit and read all the text in the space or want to figure out what they want to hone in on, I found that to be so compelling as a way just to sort of scan the exhibition first and sort of see what caught your ear and then eye. So I wonder if that's a strategy like you've used in other spaces and just like speaking to some of those strategies and what you've noticed about the audience response so far. How have visitors been engaging with this exhibition?
Yeah, those are really great questions. And at the History Museum, it is our mission to serve as a place of learning and civic engagement and to do the work to connect people to Chicago's history, but also to each other. And that has, of late, produced these types of exhibitions that bring in voice, that allow people themselves as we can to advance the stories. It also has allowed us to get really creative with how we interpret, let's say, someone's letter that they've written to someone. It's really centering the human part of history that has sort of guided our exhibitions of late, including Designing for Change. And what I also really like about this effort, Art Design Chicago, is that there always has been this attempt to bring different institutions together to learn from one another. So there was a learning steering committee that was convened to really think about, art and how it connects with community and how we might invite community in to aid in the development of some of our projects. So at the History Museum, we were fortunate enough to have the capacity to bring in artists, historians, civic leaders, organizers, and the like to help us shape the narrative and also shape the public and community engagement that was coming out of supporting really the project. So from our conversations that we had, that certainly there was a lot of candor that was needed, a lot of honesty, and all of that we absorbed and made sure that as part of the project, we followed, I want to say, about 4 major guidelines that they shared with us. One was to let the artists speak. You do not have to have heavy didactics all the time. We are letting the art, guide the narrative, but we can also let the artists themselves have a say and share what they intended for their various pieces of art in the show. So those audio clips that you spoke about, those were very important and a key response to what our community advisors shared with us. Also was to lean in on the intersectionality between these movements and even within the movements, because not everyone, even in a movement, had the same idea, their same ideology. And you can see evidence of that in work. But when it was all said and done, they were able to coalesce and create these amazing pieces that continue to inform our society, like we've been saying. So there are also those, when we talk about intersectionality, there are connector organizations or connector artists or connector movements that exist kind of between different factions of a singular effort or between different movements. So as an example, you were talking about Ebony. Ebony is a connector between the civil rights movement and the Chicago Freedom Movement and Black Power and Black art. They made space and covered both within their publications. You can track that fairly clearly. Another one is the Blazing Star Group. So they were advocating for women, but also for lesbian women as well. So a connector between the women's liberation and then gay liberatory efforts. And another, I won't say request, but a need of this exhibition was to bring in sound. Now, while there is no sound in the exhibition, there is a really extensive playlist that you can access via QR code in the show where, songs that they'd selected, staff had selected, sort of come together to sort of set a mood for the exhibition. And above all else, really, was this idea that this is a legacy in Chicago, that this use of art, this making of art to support society and social movements has not stopped. The 60s and 70s is not the only moment, but we want to ask people to consider how they might engage, knowing that this type of art is still happening. Would you like to be an arts maker? Would you like to support arts? Do you want to learn more about art? Whatever it may be, it's understanding that it's not an exclusive club. You can engage in whatever way you would like. And that if you want to know, folks that you could support that are doing work today or legacy folks that were active in the 60s and 70s, hopefully this exhibition brought them together in a way that inspired people. So exhibiting and building pathways for general folks to engage is not easy, but it's helpful when you have other folks on the outside with fresh eyes that can help to structure the best way for folks to connect. And I think we did a fairly good job of it.
That's fantastic. And so as we're kind of coming to the tail chunk of our conversation, I want to think about what you just talked about with the different intersections, and you listed these various groups in the 60s and 70s and what they were overlapping with. I think it's probably safe to say from what I observed in the exhibition, one thing that drew them all together was the anti-war sentiment, pretty much, in Chicago especially, and in 68. And I see, again, I'm just going to use the background of Monica's Zoom window because it's so replete with imagery. Queer as in Free Palestine is, I assume, something that you've made or someone that nope, okay. It doesn't exactly look like your work, so, but someone whose work you're champion on all your Zooms as you go across the Zoomosphere with meetings. But I guess I was trying to think about, each of you has given so much thought and attention to the different strategies that have come out of Chicago and beyond in the 60s and 70s and more recently. And there's a lot of amazing stuff from even the 19th century that starts the show. I wonder if you have advice for those people who are maybe going to be making signs in the coming week or two before the DNC arrives back in Chicago. Like, what strategies seem to have endured and worked? What are some, moments of inspiration for kind of like creative sign making and stuff? And if any of you have a special attention to either puppet making or protests at night, we're going to do a couple workshops at Co-Prosperity next week about those two things. So welcoming any ideas along those lines, or just sort of takeaways that you think, oh, it's really important to learn from this movement's strategies. And I don't know. I know that's a huge question. Olivia, just anything that comes to mind when I mention that.
I would say make it bright, make it bold, and don't just leave it on the street, or keep it in your own archive, or eventually you may offer it to the Chicago History Museum. As I mentioned, CHM did have quite a bit of this material in the collection, and it was actually collected at the time from our predecessors. So there's quite a legacy there too. People really were aware of this, and they were bringing that material into the collection. So I think that's a tradition that we should try to continue as well.
Erica A., can people just bring you all their signs next week and 2 weeks from now?
I may have just opened a can of worms.
And B, then what are some of your tips for folks making new stuff? Yeah.
Regarding the signs, there is a process that our collections team uses because we want to take everything. We do. We think it's all meaningful. We're museum people. Give us all of the wonderful things. But we also have to be mindful that as a museum worker, when you bring something in, you have to take care of it. It has to have space, has to be cataloged, managed, and maintained. And we have to be good stewards too. Like just say, okay, I don't know if we have the capacity to do this right now, but what we can also do. Sorry, I don't know if you all heard that going by, but that was one of the for the Air and Water Show. But what we can do, if we cannot take something, we can recommend a place that could, or we could also, this is also part of our practice, you know, we offer workshops where we're informing people on how they can best take care of their own things, develop their own archive, sure. And then regarding folks that are making signs, number one, be safe. Number two, picking up on what Libby was saying, hold on to it. These things are going to be important. They're important right now. Also, thirdly, don't feel like you have to make it perfect. Just say something and make it meaningful. Those are my tips.
That's great. And now from the artist in the exhibition, tell us exactly how to make the best sign, Monica.
I also hear a plane from the Air and Water Show right now. So I have so many thoughts. I'm going to try to keep it as quick as possible. One is more theoretical, and then I'll go into more like visual specific. Big picture, Nick, I heard you mention there's like puppet making coming up soon. I think that's beautiful. And so one of my values as an artist is that process is just as important as the product that you create. So for me, I like to integrate my artistic practice with building community. So if you can make art with other people that you're going to be out in the streets with, I think that's really beautiful and important and can create long-lasting relationships that, you know, will extend beyond just this one action or this one mobilization.
That's right.
I'm thinking a lot about this quote by June Jordan that is, I must become a menace to my enemies. So I think about that quote a lot. And I think to me, it says, be bold in your messaging. Don't be afraid to be, you know, provocative if you must. And simultaneously, because I love nuance, I think it's very easy to be against something, but it's harder to say what you are for. And so I think in your sign making, say what you're for. You know, I know you saw the poster in the back, not my art. It says Queer as in Free Palestine. It's made by an artist in Oakland, California, but was actually printed by Aaron Hughes, who has a poster in the exhibition and lives really close to me and is a good friend. But I think I lost my train of thought there, but I think that it's really important to say what you are for and to be meaningful with it, right? So that's big picture. And then a smaller picture in terms of like the aesthetic and visual, keep it short. Don't use too many words in your poster. I always recommend in workshops that I lead about art making for movements and for mobilizations, try to stick to no more than 6 words on your poster, because you do want someone to just see it really quick and then like be able to read it and not have to like, you know, which is the antithesis to the poster that I made that's in the exhibition. It has a lot of words in it. That's different. I didn't make that poster specifically for a protest. I made that poster to be in a book and to be in exhibitions. So keep it short, keep it sweet, keep it meaningful.
Okay. Well, that's a great note. I wish we could keep talking, but we're at the end of our hour. I encourage everyone to check out and learn more about Designing for Change, Chicago protest art in the 1960s and 70s at the Chicago History Museum. It will be up through 2025 spring, and to learn from what you can find online about it, you can find a New City article, a Chicago Reader article, and check it out. So I really thank you to each of our guests: Olivia Mahoney, curator; Monica Trinidad, artist; Erica Griffin, education director. And I hope you have great days and stay safe in the DNC. And see you all soon. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the Art Design Chicago Talk series. Conversations with the artists, curators, and cultural organizers behind the exhibitions featured as part of Art Design Chicago, exploring the intersections of art, design, activism, and the city's relationship with indigeneity, migration, and displacement. The Art Design Chicago Talk series is a part of Art Design Chicago, a citywide collaboration initiated by the Terra Foundation for American Art that highlights the city's artistic heritage and creative communities. Art Design Chicago Talk series is an original production of Lumpen Radio, produced by Stephanie Manriquez, Charlie Garcia, Nick Wiley, S.Y. Lim, and Ariandi Luna.